Today we're going to redo the demonstration that we went through in class so that we can kind of get off on the right foot for our first homework assignment. Alright, we're going to set up a window-based project. Go ahead and name that project whatever you want. We'll make it a universal application. And then pick a top-level directory where it's going to reside. Go ahead and make sure that it's a local Git repository, because that'll be helpful later as we add more to it. You'll see that Xcode here created a nice template for us. It created different code pathways for the iPhone and for the iPad, created our header and implementation files, and it created our zip files for Interface Builder. So here we'll select the main window, iPhone zip, and we'll start to build our interface. Okay, we're going to open up our object library. We're going to drag over a UI label. We'll resize it and adjust some of the font properties of it just to make it look nice. Make it a little bigger, center align it, and we can change the text label. Next, we're going to go ahead and grab a UI button. We're going to set it in our interface. We can make similar adjustments to it. Go ahead and change the title to Update the Time. Alright, now we'll go ahead and run it and see what happens. So we'll select iPhone from our scheme. We go ahead and click, and we'll see nothing happened. Well, the reason is that even though we built the interface, we didn't tell our code about it. So what we need to do is go ahead and let our code know about the interface objects that we have. So let's open up the Assistant Editor and click on our control objects, and we're going to create an outlet for it. So we create one called Time Label, and we're going to create another one. In this case, we're going to create an action. When someone taps the button, we want it to update the time. So we'll go ahead and create an action called Update the Time, and that's going to go ahead and create a method for us. And if we look at our implementation file, we'll see that we have a method called Update the Time. Now to test it out, let's go ahead and put a NSLog statement in there. It says button touched. And that way we can see in the console when we run it if we're actually making sure those connections are in place. So let's go ahead and we will run it again. Let's open up our console view. Gotta find our simulator. Go ahead and click it, and you can see button touched, button touched, button touched. So that means that we've correctly wired up our interface to our code. So now let's go and we're going to do an update to the UI label, the time label. And we're going to, since we declared it as a property and since we synthesized it, we're able to use the dot notation to set the text. So we have a UI label, the property is text, and then we're going to call it update the time. Okay? And so we see the first time we click that the UI label text updated to update the time. Okay, so now let's add our second UI label. So we'll open our object library again. We'll put it over here. We're going to make this bigger because we're going to be resizing that text for our assignment. Let's go ahead and just call it some text that will be resized. Okay, so you can type anything you want in here. This is just a placeholder. So now let's go ahead and drag a UI slider control. We can make it extend the whole length again so all our elements are lined up. You see Interface Builder puts a nice blue dashed line to let us know when things are perfectly aligned. We're going to go over here and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to make sure that our code knows about this. We're going to set an outlet for the UI label, and we're going to call this resize label. Okay, now we're going to control click onto our slider, drag it over to our header file, and we're going to create a new action here. And we're going to call this resize label. And under the event, we want to make sure that we're monitoring the event value changed. Okay, looks like we're actually going to name it update this label size. Okay, so now we have connected up our second UI label and our slider, and you can see over in our implementation file that we have a new method created called update the label size, and we'll put another log statement in to make sure that we were able to make sure that connection's working properly. So we're going to go ahead and run it again. And what should happen here is each time that we slide the label, the event is changing. It's receiving that event, and then it's going to run that method called update the label size. So let's watch what happens here. Okay, we button touch, so that works, and slider moved. So with each change, the slider moved is going to call that method. So here, what we need to do is we want to find out not only that the slider moved, but we also want to get the value of that slider. So we're going to go ahead and get some information about the slider. To do this, we're going to cast the weak typed ID object to a UI slider object. That way we can access directly the slider's property, which is called value. And here we're going to do another NSLog statement, and we're going to format that. The slider value is going to be a float, so we can use our standard C printf syntax. So let's see what happens now when we run it. When we move the slider, we see that we're only registering values of 0 and 1, which means that we need to adjust some of the attributes of the UI slider. So we're going to go back into our interface, and we're going to select our UI slider, and we'll check out some of the attributes that we can set for it. So we have a minimum and a maximum value that we can set. So here we'll set it to something that makes sense for font size. We'll put it between 10 and 100, and we'll set the default to be 10. So now let's go back and run it and see what kind of values we get. You can see now we're going from 10 all the way up to 100 and back. In your assignment, you're going to be using that value to update the size of the text in the UI label. An alternative way of getting the information about that slider, instead of casting the ID object to UI slider, we can actually create an outlet for our UI slider object. So what we do is we control-click and drag it over to our header file. You can see that it creates an instance variable of it and creates a property for it. And then if we go back, we'll also see that it's been updated our implementation file. Now we can directly access the value property of our UI slider that's been declared in our interface. And you can see when we do it, the same thing happens, the exact same thing. So it's two different ways of getting the same type of behavior out of your application. Now it should be noted that we don't need to create an outlet for the button because our code doesn't need to access the button. Thank you, and good luck with the first assignment.